Welcome to this week's episode of Sussex Sport Weekly Podcast. I'm Matt Powell, and this week I'm joined by Brighton and Hove Albion writers Derren Howard and Frankie Elliott and Crawley Town expert Mark Dunford. Albion continued their push for European qualification with a brilliant come-from-behind win at beleaguered Chelsea on Saturday. Julio Enciso became the latest Brighton young gun to hit the headlines after a stunning strike helped the Seagulls to a first-ever win at Stamford Bridge. We will look back on that game and look ahead to the small matter of Sunday's FA Cup semi-final against Manchester United. Crawley Town, meanwhile, did their League Two survival bid the world of good thanks to a 4-point week. The Reds beat Tranmere Rovers on Saturday before a goalless draw with Colchester United on Tuesday. We will reflect on a good week for Crawley and preview Saturday's potentially massive clash at relegation rivals Hartlepool. But before we go anyone else, we have two award winners in our midst. Mr. Mark Dunford and Frankie Elliott both picked up awards this week. Mr. Dunford, you scooped your gong on Monday. Oh, yeah. Could you tell us a little bit about the award that you won?
Yeah, so I was given by the Real EFL and the Lower League Look podcast. I was given the League One, League Two Journalist of the Year, which was it's always nice to be recognised. Their citation was basically for all the I was going to use a bad word then for all the rubbish I've had to put up with this year, whether it be silence from the owners, stuff with the club, fans having a go at me and all that, and just because it's been a crazy season, as we all know. 5 managers, American owners selling their best players, managers quitting after what seemed like a couple of days. So it's a sort of bit of a journalist dream, sort of covering them. But it's nice to be recognised because it's been a lot of hours, a lot of work and that. But it's really good, and I'm just glad that Frankie's not the only award winner on this. Well,
that's nicely segueing into Mr. Frankie Elliott. You added to your AFC Barn Indians medal collection last night, I think it was. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, as recognised by my peers, it was a great night. We were playing at Three Bridges first team ground after winning the County Cup 3 weeks ago. We were playing in more of a League Cup. It was the Edgar German League Cup. So more like the EFL Cup in comparison to what we'd won before. But it was a great night. We played Crawley United. We were a goal down in the first half. Brought it back and with a last-minute winner, won it 2-1. So that's our second cup victory, and the league title could be wrapped up this weekend as well. So it's a good time to be a Vardinian. Much better than winning any sort of journalism award. They're really, really dull. So.
Well, congratulations to you both, and hopefully long may the success continues. But now we'll go to matters on the pitch. We'll start with Brighton and Hove Albion, as ever. Their performance at Stamford Bridge was the perfect response to last week's controversial Tottenham. The only black spot, I suppose you could say, was Evan Ferguson coming off injured in the first half. What did you make of Albion's display, Derren?
Exactly, Matt. It was the perfect response to the Tottenham match and just what they needed, really. Even more impressive because they went 1-0 down as well. But as we mentioned last week, Brighton, they just have this confidence now that they're going to score. And even when things are going against them, they keep playing their style, and at times at Stamford Bridge, they're 70% possession against the Chelsea team. They look terrible to be honest. For the most part, they look clueless and just really, really average. But Brighton made the most out of it, and Julio Enciso, he obviously scored that brilliant goal to seal the points. But it could have been 4 or 5. Really, they were that dominant. What I found quite interesting afterwards, it was, hearing De Zerbi's comments after the match, especially on Enciso. He was obviously delighted with the winning goal, but also said he wasn't too pleased with his performance after he scored. And which to be fair is, if you're a 19-year-old, you put one in the top corner from 30 yards, your emotions are going to be running high. But it was typical of De Zerbi, really. He challenged his young players, especially the younger ones, and it's quite an interesting management technique because he tends to do it after players do something well. So he will then have a little, perhaps a little dig or a little bit of criticism just to keep them on their toes. So it's an interesting style that De Zerbi has, and if Enciso had a bad game or given the ball away, he would probably have been the first to back them to the hilt. But yeah, it's quite an interesting sort of quirk of his his manager. But it was the perfect response. And yeah, the only downside is Evan Ferguson. It looks like he's out for a couple of weeks, and also Joel Veltman, who pulled a hamstring. So and Veltman is a blow because obviously Lamptey's still out with his knee issue. But yeah, great day all round though for the fans as well.
As Derren mentioned there, Frankie, De Zerbi was critical of Enciso. After the game, the Italian said Enciso played a fantastic game until the goal, and then he finished the game. Do you think that's a fair criticism for De Zerbi, or a bit of a harsh one on the 19-year-old?
I think it's actually the right thing to be saying. It's very funny. I did a story earlier this week after what McAllister said after the game, and he said something very similar. He wasn't too quick to praise his teammate. He said he needs to continue working hard and continue to keep pushing into the team, because I think the thing that they are both reiterating to him, because he's obviously 19 years old and this has been his breakout moment, is that football can be a very cruel game and moves very, very quickly, and he doesn't want to be remembered for just that goal. It's not a bad thing to be remembered for, don't get me wrong, but he doesn't want to be that just to be his only career highlight, which, he has to look across his own bench to look at someone like Billy Gilmour. I think we all remember about 3 years ago, his man of the match performances for Chelsea against Liverpool and Everton. Coming out of as 18 years old, the world at his feet, many saw him to be the next Chelsea midfielder. 3 years later, a failed loan move at Norwich, a move to Brighton. He's only played 10 appearances this season, 2 of those being starts. So, that's being harsh. Of course, he's playing behind Caicedo and McAllister. But, if you ask Gilmour after, or anyone in the Chelsea setup after those 2 performances against Liverpool and Everton, where Gilmour would be in 4 years on the bench at Brighton, I don't think many would have said that would have been the step in his career that he should be taking. So I think the reason they're saying that to Enciso is because, look, what a moment, what a great thing to win the match with one of the goals of the season at Stamford Bridge. It's a phenomenal thing, but you can't get carried away with it, which is easy to do, especially, when you're being surrounded with friends and family. They're all telling you that was an amazing moment. You get caught up in it because, Enciso's not starting. He's not a regular starter yet for Brighton. He still needs to work hard to get into the team. So it's making sure they keep grounding and keep working hard, because there's so much potential there, as evident in that goal, that, don't let it go to waste. And I think he's in the right place to do so, because there are so many experienced players in that Brighton setup: Lewis Dunk, Danny Welbeck, Adam Lallana, which can help guide him through these early formative years. And he's also, around people that speak the same language as him, and he feels at home. A lot of the South American contingent, I'm sure, we can see from the sort of YouTube clips that Brighton put out of training, and Enciso feels very at home alongside people like Caicedo, Sarmiento, and of course Alexis McAllister, who I would also include. I know he's only 24, but he's a senior player. He's a World Cup winner. He is, a top level player, and he is giving him guidance to make sure that he's not getting carried away. And I think, as harsh as it sounds after you've scored one of the best goals of the season, to be told that, you didn't have a great game and you need to continue working hard, it's important, because, like I say, football moves very, very quickly. And we've seen it many, many times where players I remember Makeda scoring for Manchester United, that goal against Aston Villa that basically won United the title. That's all he's remembered for. And obviously, that is a great thing to be remembered for, but it's a long career and you want to make the most out of it for sure.
And what did the Vardinians manager say to you after your cup win last night, Frankie? Was it similar to De Zerbi? Was he critical of your performance?
I see. I think he said it's time to call it a day, to be honest. But,
Well, BBC pundit Chris Sutton said after Chelsea's win that Albion are possibly the most attractive Premier League club for young players. He cited the performances and opportunities afforded to players like Evan Ferguson and Enciso, and as well as the management of Roberto De Zerbi. Do you agree with that assessment, Derren? And do you think the examples that he's given there of Evan Ferguson and Enciso shows that Brighton's standing in the game is only increasing?
Yeah, I think that he's spot on there, really. That they are, at the moment, they're one of the most attractive teams, I'd say, to make that next step. If you're a player at that level looking to make your first move to Europe or break into the Premier League, then you'd have to look at Brighton. They've proved with the likes of sort of Bissouma, Trossard, Cucurella, McAllister, as you say as well, Caicedo, Ferguson and Mitoma, and now Enciso, that if you are good enough and work hard, then you'll get your chance at Brighton. The club and the managers, Potter did before as well, and De Zerbi does now. They're brave enough to throw the youngsters in and to perform in the Premier League as well. And as Frankie mentioned earlier, obviously it has to be a balance, and you need your senior players such as Dunk, Pascal Gross, who he signed a new contract this week actually, which is a huge boost for the club. Especially with his experience to guide these younger players along. And they have players like Lallana as well who can help them. But so far the youngsters, they seem to be introduced at the right time and help the team. Evan Ferguson, he had the chance to go to Liverpool when he left Bohemians a few years ago, but he chose Brighton because he could see a path into the first team. Matoma, he could have gone to Celtic, but he chose Brighton. So you can see that the players really do see them as an attractive proposition, and I think the profile of McAllister has really helped too. If you're one of the best young players in South America, and you see what McAllister's achieved in the Premier League with Brighton and at the World Cup with Argentina, you'd have to say young players, their agents, and the clubs in South America will see Brighton. And I think that was key in sort of helping them to sign this Bonotti as well, Facundo Bonotti. And most clubs in the Premier League and Europe, they know who the best young players are, so that they're competing. These young players are, they could have 5, 6, 7, possibly more clubs to choose from. So Brighton are competing with those. And, seeing the setup at Brighton, seeing how they look after the younger players and the opportunities and sometimes the patience they show is huge. McAllister, he took a couple of years to really get going. And, they also know in most instances as well that Brighton will not stand in their way and potentially will sell them to bigger clubs if they perform well. Not always, as we saw with Caicedo earlier this season, but at some stage when the time suits them, they will. And I think that's very attractive for players and agents who are looking to make their next steps.
Well, one player who I think has flown under the radar this season, probably doesn't necessarily get the recognition he deserves, is Danny Welbeck. He netted Brighton's equaliser at Brighton, bringing his tally to 5 in all competitions this season. And speaking to Radio 5 Live, Liverpool striker Natasha Dowie said Welbeck is almost having a second career at the MX. Do you think Welbeck is enjoying something of a renaissance at the Seagulls, Frankie? And how important is a player of Welbeck's experience to the young strikers like Evan Ferguson and Julio Enciso?
Yeah, I think when the minute he signed, I think it was back in 2020, I thought it was going to be an excellent move. I think we spoke, Darren's just spoken there about the sort of recruitment policy that Brighton have used over the last 3-4 years, and a lot of talk has gone into the bringing in of young players from abroad, especially from South America. I think two of the key signings in this almost this build of Brighton as a Premier League club is the signing of Lallana and Welbeck, two experienced players who have played at the highest level of football, international football, have come in, and there is an inkling that you could say when Welbeck signed, a lot of people could say, well, this is him maybe taking his the end of his career, the last paycheck before he walks into the sun, because injury plagued career, a lot of promise coming through the Ferguson United team. He was meant to be the next star player coming out of Old Trafford, ended up playing for United and Arsenal, never scored more than 10 goals. Well, he scored 10 goals in a season twice, and they've never scored more than that. So never really fulfilled the potential. But what Brighton saw, I think, is it was an international player that's played at 3 major tournaments for England, scored at the Euros, 16 goals in 42 games. That's a very good record at international level. A player that has played over 250 games for Arsenal and Manchester United, has won 4 major trophies. He's been there as an experienced player at the highest level. Whether he is reached the heights of world class status, obviously not, but he's still an excellent player to have as a Premier League club outside the top 6. And I think Welbeck also saw it as an opportunity to be the main man, which he is. He's come in as he's been playing at these big clubs. He's been second fiddle to the likes of Wayne Rooney and Olivier Giroud at Arsenal, but now he is, he comes in as the main man, and I think he's flourished in that role. You look at when he plays, you see all of his qualities, which he is an excellent footballer. He's a very strong physical player. He manages to have defenders gravitate towards him, and that opens space up for the likes of when Trossard was there, but now the likes of Mitoma and March. It gives them the space to attack, which is why I think they all love playing with Welbeck. He's not ever going to be 20-goal a season man that everyone talks about in football, but he is a striker that will win you games, not by scoring goals himself. He has chipped in, obviously, here and there with some big goals like he did on Saturday. But when he plays, Brighton play well. It's as simple as that. And that is down to his experience and his ability as a player. So he has been a fantastic sign. It's been a win-win. The club have benefited from it, and Welbeck has benefited, because I think now people are seeing what a great player he is outside of the expectation of being a top 6 player. They're seeing that this is a player that is a really high-class Premier League football player with the game time he's got at Brighton and the exposure he's got as being their main striker. I think to the likes of Ferguson and Ciso, it's a brilliant role model to have, because he's been there. He was once 18. He scored at Old Trafford, in the Premier League. I remember his goal against Stoke City, his first ever goal. He's been in that limelight where it's all of a sudden you are, the next big thing to be talked about. So he can, which is what Ferguson and Ciso are now. So he can guide them through it. He can tell them what to expect. He can tell them what to do on the training ground, on the pitch on the Saturday. He is there as a guidance, as well as the people like the Lana and the Lewis Dunks of the team. So it's been a fantastic signing. And I like to say the renaissance of his career, because after he moved from Arsenal, I think a lot of people thought that was it for him. But if anything, this has been the best he's ever played. So Brighton have done really, really well there. And it's great to see for Welbeck, because he deserves to be seen as a top player.
Well, as mentioned at the top of the podcast, this weekend sees Brighton take on Danny Welbeck's old club, Man United, in the semi-finals of the FA Cup. United have lost once in their last 9 in all competitions, while last weekend's loss at Spurs was Albion's first in 7. With both sides in superb form, Derren, would you say that there is a clear favourite going into this one?
I don't think there is, no. And I think it's a real 50-50. And in my view, who'd have thought that a few years ago, if Brighton were facing Man United at Wembley? So I think, they can really go there and attack it. Against Man City 4 years ago in their semi-final, I think they went there in hope rather than expectation. And despite, they gave a good account of themselves, but they lost 1-0 to City after they got their early goal. But this time now, I think Brighton, and the way they're playing, they know they can go, toe-to-toe with a team like United. And I think they can cause them problems as well. De Zerbi, he was asked recently if they can win it, and he said it would be tough for us, but it'll also be tough for them. And I think that sums it up perfectly, really. Brighton, they are a threat. United are one of the best teams in the Premier League at the moment, and I think they can go there and just really put on a good show and have the confidence to go there and just go for it, really. And they just have to keep playing the way they have been. And Brighton do have a slight advantage, because United, they've got a very tough game in Seville on Thursday night, so recovery could be an issue for Brighton. But they have a large squad, and they should be able to cope with that. But Brighton are carrying a few injuries, which is also a concern. So a real 50-50, Matt, and it'd be a great occasion. Really looking forward to it.
Well, as Derren mentioned there, Frankie, both sides could be missing key players. Brighton could be without 8 players, including Evan Ferguson, Adam Webster and Joel Veltman, while United will definitely be without Lisandro Martinez and Harry Maguire through injury and suspension, respectively. I think Rafael Varane is also out for United. Luke Shaw, Marcel Sabitzer and Marcus Rashford were out, but I think, the story you wrote on our website, they were seen back in training ahead of the game against Seville. But with all that in mind, and not potentially taking into account any injury sustained by United against Seville, who do you think is best equipped to deal with these so-called big-name players through to injury or suspension, Frankie?
You'd say United are more equipped. They're more star-studded squad, and the depth they have as a Big Six team would mean that they should be more equipped to deal with this. However, it's an alarming centre-back issue they do have. Obviously, you allude to there, no Varane, no Martinez until the end of the season. They're 2 best centre-backs. And then Harry Maguire is also suspended for this game. So that is another centre-back. So that leaves only Lindelof, really, is their only fit centre-back, as Phil Jones, we're not sure about his health status at the moment. So it looks really like Scott McTominay will have to play centre back, which I know he does for Scotland, but that's not his natural position. If you look back to the game at Old Trafford in August this season, Danny Welbeck caused Lindelof. He gave him a nightmare game. He really did. I know Martinez was his partner, but it was a disastrous showing in that game. So Welbeck will be licking his lips. I think that would be a real key battle in that game. Obviously, with Ferguson not available, so I think that will be really interesting. So, but as you alluded to as well, I think they'll be buoyed by the fact that Shaw, Sabritzer and Rashford have travelled to Seville. I doubt they'll start on Thursday, them three, but it looks likely at least, a start for maybe someone like Rashford or Shaw could come on Sunday, which is a big boost. And then for Brighton, as Derren said at the top of this podcast, Veltman injury is a very alarming one because no Lamptey either. It looks like Pascal Gross will have to go to right back. They would probably normally move to a back three and then put Solly March at right wing back, but with no Webster, I don't think they'll feel comfortable doing that. So it means Pascal Gross at right back. Does he drop McAllister out the number 10 role? I don't see it because there's no Lallana. There's no Sarmiento either, who could have been in the shout. I don't think Enciso, who won't want to play him through the middle. I think he'd rather play him out wide. So I think there's a opportunity in midfield for Billy Gilmour to step in. Big game for him to step in, but I think that would be the safest option. Not too many changes then, which you won't want to change a winning side too much. So I could see Caicedo and Gilmour as the sitting midfielders, and McAllister and the number 10, and Pascal Gross at right back. But that will be the big key battle, because I think we spoke a lot about Brighton's midfield dominating games. In the last 2 weeks away from home, Stamford Bridge and the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, they were 60% possession. They're coming up against probably outside of City the best midfield in the league in Casemiro and Christian Eriksen. Casemiro arguably the best defensive mid in the Prem, even if not the world. So Gilmour having to step in for that game alongside Caicedo will be a tough test, and will be interesting to see if he goes with that, of course. But different issues for both sides, and it makes for an interesting battle. Already, there's already two good teams going at each other, but now these injury dilemmas have added another factor to the mix.
Well, how and where do you think the tie could be won or lost for both sides? Starting with you, Derren, how do you think the tie could be won or lost for Brighton?
It's interesting listening to Frankie there, because I think that is a real issue, the right back slot at Brighton at the moment. Ideally, you'd want, if Veltman's unavailable, you'd want Lamptey to come in, and his pace would be a real asset against the likes of potentially Rashford. Got Sancho, Martial as well. But it's very, very difficult to sort of pinpoint one area. I think both teams have threats in wide areas. I thought Anthony looked really good for United as they beat Forest. Plus, as you mentioned, plus if Sancho, Rashford could be back as well. All very fast, dangerous and clever players. So United's pace, especially in that fullback area, is a concern for me. But Brighton have to attack because they have their own, very dangerous players of their own. And Mitoma has been one of the best players in the Premier League this season. Solly March continues to play the best football of his career as well. And as we spoke about earlier, Danny Welbeck, he's been very impressive. I thought he looked very good against Tottenham and also against Chelsea. He sort of comes into these deep positions, which allows March and Mitoma a bit more space to attack as well. I think his role could be key, especially with Ferguson struggling as well. And he'll be keen to do well against his old club, I'm sure. But for me, I think you also have to look at the midfield areas as well. Casemiro and Eriksen back again. I think those two are just brilliant to watch. Great players, and also Fernandes as well. That's a really sort of classy and experienced midfield three. And McAllister and Caicedo, Gross. I'd prefer to see Gross in the midfield rather than drop into fullback. I don't know whether they'd put Van Heck in as fullback. I really don't know, but I'd like to see McAllister, Caicedo and Gross stay in that midfield three to combat Casemiro, Eriksen and Fernandes. So I think it'll be a midfield battle. It'll be great to watch. And McAllister and Caicedo have been key to Albion this season. And I think they'll have to be, they'll have to be really on it this Sunday.
And what can Brighton exploit in terms of United, Frankie? And Derren's kind of touched upon it, but who should Brighton be wary of in the United camp?
Well, the first thing they'll be doing is keeping a very close eye on Thursday. I think, Derren has alluded to it, but that is a massive factor for Brighton, is the fact that United have not only a game on Thursday, but a game that they have to win. It was a 2-2 from the first leg. It's very finely poised, so they can't be taking that one lightly, and a strong team will have to be played. There's also the potential of extra time as well. So, they'll be watching that one closely for any players that take knocks and how that it plans out. But going into Sunday's game, they really need to make sure they start strong, because they can't be conceding an early goal to United because of the pace they have on the counter attack. If they are able to sit on a 1-goal lead and encourage Brighton to come at them, the players like Anthony, Sancho, Martial, Rashford, if he's available, coming at you from a counter-attacking position, that is when they really hurt you, especially with Bruno Fernandes playing so well, being able to pick the passes that he has been doing in recent weeks. It's a real threat. It's a real threat in those attacking areas from wide areas. And Derren, as Derren said, it's the midfield battle is so fascinating. This is going to be, to watch Caicedo play against Casemiro is something I'm really looking forward to. I think it's one of the best players we've seen the last sort of 5-6 years in midfield, versus one of the most exciting prospects in the central midfield role as well. So looking forward to that battle, but also, like I say, I think to stay in the game, not to say stay in the game as an underdog, because Brighton are an underdog, but to fall a goal behind is what United are looking for, because they are looking to play on the counter-attack as much as they can, due to the fact that they've got so much pace and so many options going forward that they can look to exploit when you're chasing a goal. But yeah, a fascinating prospect against, like I say, two really excellent teams with loads of good players all over the pitch.
Well, an FA Cup semi-final between United and the Seagulls has already been played. United women ran out 3-2 winners over Brighton in a dramatic women's FA Cup semi-final clash. Albion matched United all the way, only coming unstuck with a minute to go through Rachel Williams' goal. How proud should Albion be of their performance against United, Derren, considering the considerable gap between the two sides?
Yeah, very, very proud. I think it was a really good performance. I saw the match on TV after the Brighton Chelsea game, and they played very well, as you say, against the sort of Man United team that beat them comfortably 4-0 the previous week. So lots to be pleased about. And yeah, when Danielle Carter, she came off the bench and pulled it back to 2-2, you just thought that they might be able to pull off something special and deliver the shock of the competition so far. But United, they've got a strong squad. They've been really impressive in the WSL this season, and there's a player off the bench that came on and made the difference, really. But what impressed me the most was the organisation of the team. It looked so much better, and the work rate was so much better as well. And they were also a threat, against a really good Man United team. So full credit to Melissa Phillips, really, who's she seems like a manager that the players want to play for. And yeah, the best thing as well is that they followed it up against Everton. So a very encouraging start for Phillips, and a huge boost to the whole squad. They just seem re-energized, really, after an unstable season. So you sort of get the feeling now that they can lift themselves out of trouble and stay in the WSL, which, after all the investment they've put into the training facilities, the plans they have for the women's team, it's they can't drop down. It's vital for them to stay up, and I think Melissa Phillips's appointment should give them the energy to do that.
Well, as Derren mentioned there, Frankie, Brighton are off the bottom of the WSL after a crucial 3-2 home win over Everton. Elizabeth Turland scored twice either side of Katie Robinson's chip to move Albion 2 points clear of the drop zone. How much of a lift has the new manager, Melissa Phillips, given Albion, Frankie? And a strong performance against United was followed by an impressive display against the Toffees. And do you think a good result is in the offing at Liverpool on Sunday?
Yeah, I think they've. It's been a really shrewd appointment. I think they were obviously disappointed to lose Amy Merricks, but I think employing another female coach was a really smart move. I think obviously we saw the success that Hope Powell brought over the last number of years in getting to Brighton to where they are. I think Amy Merricks was a well-loved coach in the setup and is obviously going on to do great things, or hopefully do great things on the international stage. And then this appointment, I think you can really feel that she's galvanised and understands the group. And from hearing the players' interviews before the semi-final, you could really feel that togetherness, despite their league position and who they were playing. And I think you saw that on the pitch. They really dug in. They really stuck together against a really good United side who had a number of chances before Brighton took the lead. But I think it's obviously disappointing to lose in the last minute, no matter what game you're playing and who you're playing. But they would have come away from that game, especially the manager would have come away and said that's everything I wanted to see. I saw the fight, I saw the quality, I saw the desire to come back from a goal down, to stick in it and grind it out. We've got the tools. So it's all there. And then the Everton game coming so soon afterwards was probably a blessing in disguise. They could run with that momentum of feeling that we weren't outplayed against Manchester United. We weren't completely outclassed. Let's take that good performance into a game against Everton and turn it into a good result, which is what they did. And, they've got 3 huge games coming up. They've got 8th place Liverpool, 10th place Tottenham, both away from home. And then they play 7th place West Ham at home. 3 huge games before they have to play Arsenal. If they look at that and they can get, let's say, 5 points, being average 5 points, with the other teams around, they could, stretch that gap away from the relegation zone, and then they can, it turns their season around completely, which is what they need. And then with this appointment, they can start to rebuild and look to next season. So a critical period coming up, but that performance in the FA Cup semi-final, despite the result, is exactly what they needed, and they delivered that, and hopefully they can turn it into more positive results.
Well, meanwhile, Crawley Town moved out of the League Two relegation places this week thanks to a 2-1 win over Tranmere on Saturday and a goalless draw with relegation rivals Colchester in midweek. Saturday against Tranmere saw Corey Adai go from villain to hero, letting in a soft goal before saving a late Tranmere Rovers spot kick. How big was that result for Crawley Town, Mark, especially given the disappointment of the Barrow game?
Yeah, it was huge. It was interesting because afterwards, Scott Lindsay made 7 changes from the previous week's starting lineup for the Barrow game, which they lost 4-0. And you had the likes of Caleb Chukwuemeka playing. Anthony Grant came in, I think, was it his first start, I think. And it was suddenly back to a real full strength, as possibly one of the strongest lineups Scott Lindsay's been able to put out this year against Tranmere. And and he was asked afterwards about it, and he said we had to sacrifice a few things against Barrow, and it's paid off. Job done. I've done my job well there, sort of thing. And you could tell he was quite happy, because I think basically he thought we're never going to get anything at Barrow, no matter what lineup we put out. But Tranmere is a game we can definitely win, and we want our strongest lineup. So put out a weaker side against Barrow, sacrificial lambs, as it were, and then go out against Tranmere, and they thoroughly deserved the win against Tranmere. I mean, it was inexplicable, the first goal. Because something happened beforehand, and I was writing a tweet, and because the ball was passed back to Corey Adai, and I was looking down, doing a tweet. Suddenly there was some distance cheers from the away end, and it was in the back of the net. I didn't know what happened. I had to find out, ask around me what actually happened. But it would have been an absolute unjust if Tranmere had scored that penalty at the end, because they didn't deserve anything out of the game. Tranmere were dreadful that game, but Crawley were really good, and probably should have been 4 or 5 at half time for Crawley. 4-5-1. They played really well. Second half, they did try to contain, and it nearly backfired. But luckily, Corey Adai, and I was so pleased for him because he is such a lovely bloke, Corey Adai. When you meet him afterwards, he's so sincere. He's always happy to see you and that. So, no, it was really good, and I think the fans were really obviously pleased with that. But, it was an important 3 points, because obviously Hartlepool, I think, drew on Saturday, and then they lost midweek. So there's now that 3-point gap, and obviously going into this weekend. So it's huge. Absolutely huge.
Well, yeah, as you mentioned there, the draw with Colchester means that the Reds are 3 clear of Hartlepool with 3 games to go. Scott Lindsay said it was another point in the right direction, but obviously he wanted the 3. How would you assess the Colchester point mark? It's not disastrous considering Hartlepool's midweek defeat, but it still annoyingly keeps them within touching distance of Crawley.
Yeah, it's a shame they didn't get that, because if they'd won on Tuesday night, they would have a win would have been enough to keep them up this Saturday, to give them the extra drive. I mean, they don't need much incentive to do well this weekend, but that would have just given them that extra boost. But I think all the pressure is on Hartlepool this weekend. Crawley, yeah, again, they will go up there to win, and I know Scott Lindsay will go up there to win, but as long as they don't lose, it will be a good day for Crawley on Saturday. So yeah, it was a good point, but it could have been more. But reading the fans afterwards, a few people were moaning as they normally do, but a lot of them were looking at the big picture and thinking, actually, we didn't lose. It's a good point. Hartlepool lost. So yeah, but yeah, leads us into this weekend, doesn't it? It's going to be fascinating on Saturday.
Well, how do you see that one going? Hartlepool are unbeaten at 5 at home, albeit only one of them have been wins. While the less said about the Reds away form, the better. How do you see that one going, Mark?
Well, I think, like I just said, the pressure is all on Hartlepool, really. The Hartlepool will be massively up for it. They're expecting their biggest crowd of the season there. Joe Ramage from the Hartlepool Mail has done a little preview for us, which you can see on sussexworld.co.uk. Hartlepool, yeah, I think I can see Crawley getting something. I don't know if they'll win. I hope they do, obviously, but I think if Crawley can get a draw on Saturday, that just means they need a win in their last two games, which is Walsall at home and Swindon away, two teams that haven't got anything to play for. I mean, I know they're dangerous when you play teams that haven't got anything to play for, but it gives Crawley the sort of upper hand. So I think Crawley will get something, and it will be a good weekend for Crawley Town.
Well, unfortunately, events off the field this week were once again overshadowed by things on the pitch. Monday saw the Crawley Town Supporters Alliance announce it no longer had confidence in current co-chairman Preston Johnson and Eben Smith, as well as interim CEO Chris Galley, and the CTSA called for the trio to go. Preston Johnson responded by saying they remained 100% focused on supporting Scott Lindsay and the battle against relegation, and the sole focus was that until the club's safety was secured. What did you make of the statements and Preston's comments, Mark? Timing the statement came out before the midweek game against Colchester. Might that have been distracting, and will the CTSA statement potentially enforce change, or do you think it's not going to achieve much?
It was a funny one. I was surprised when it came out. I wasn't surprised by the statement, but just the timing of it did seem very odd. Because a couple of fans came up to me on Saturday and said, I see Preston's not here today. And he said, and there were reasons. I won't go into the reasons why Preston wasn't there.
Yeah.
But and they were saying, oh, their position's untenable, sort of thing. So it's a general chat around the fans that they don't think that these people should be in charge of the football club anymore. And it's not just the fans. I think there's a lot of people who probably don't think they should be responsible for the day-to-day running. I mean, I don't think it was distracting Scott Lindsay. I don't think Scott Lindsay's the type of manager that would even take notice of things like that, or the players would do. But yeah, it was strange timing. I mean, I was told by a source that that WAGMI were going to be making a statement at some point after the Colchester game, but that was before the CTSA statement came out. So I don't know if there was anything related with those two. And now that the WAGMI haven't made any statements, I don't know what their statement would have been, but whether they were thinking possibly that they were thinking of changes, but it would look a bit odd, I think, if they came out straight after the CTSA have called for it. It just looks like they're playing to the crowd, as it were. So, I mean, that's all speculation from me. But it's a funny one. I wasn't surprised by Preston's comments at all. I think they've said that a couple of times now on things when they're questioned, that they're only focused on survival. I do think there will be changes at the top after the season once safety's done. It'll be interesting what those changes are. I don't think Preston and Eben will be chairman anymore. Obviously, they're still going to be owning the club, and they're still going to be responsible for pumping the money in, which some of the fans realise actually that's quite an important thing. There is money there, and the club is secure financially to some extent. But it was just an odd timing before a game like that. I mean, it might have been better afterwards. It might have been better after the Hartlepool game, or once they know how safe the club is. But yeah. But it's a tense atmosphere between fans and the owners at the moment, and it has been most of the season. So as the statement goes, I'm not surprised at all by it.
Meanwhile, ex-Crawley manager John Yems saw his ban from football extended to 3 years for 12 breaches of anti-discrimination rules on Wednesday. The FA said it was the longest ever ban issued to a participant in English football for discrimination. Yems was initially banned by an independent regulatory commission for 17 months until the 1st of June 2024, but the FA appealed, arguing the sanction was insufficient, and an independent appeal board has imposed a ban from all football and football-related activity up to and including January 5th, 2026. Obviously, it's a good decision. It goes without saying, really. But how good is it for the players who suffered discrimination at the hands of Yems and Crawley Town Football Club as a whole that the issue seems to have been resolved and justice finally done, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, we won't go into what he said,
No.
but we've all seen the FA summary of what he was accused of, what he was found guilty of, and it's disgusting what he said. So, and some of his actions. So it's really good in that part. And yeah, there is, it's good for the players. And I've got a statement this morning from the PFA, from Jason Lee, who's one of the chief executives. I had it here. Oh, there it is. Sorry. And they said that they just hope that this will encourage more players to come forward. And now I think that's the thing. I mean, we all know in the past, the FA haven't got a great record on dealing with racism. And this looks like it is something that is going to start being, it's going to be, it was the Kick It Out campaign yesterday. I think it's Tony Burnett, the CEO of Kick It Out, said they hope this is a landmark moment. Players should be coming forward. These things should be dealt with, and people should be punished properly for these kind of things. I mean, yeah, I think when it first came out, all the sort of reaction was, it's good he's being punished, but that's no punishment at all for what he said. Well, and he's been proved guilty.
Yeah,
it was shocking. It was absolutely shocking. So it's really good. And I can't remember who it was that said it yesterday, but they said WAGMI have made a lot of terrible decisions in the last season, but they are a little bit vindicated on what they did here, because they did get a lot of stick when they first suspended John Yems. And yeah, there's a little bit of vindication there, I think, for WAGMI.
Good. Well, hopefully that's case closed. Right, moving on to Steve Bone's score prediction corner. We'll have Brighton against United up first. Starting with, first, before we get underway, you three will be at the Wembley on Sunday. Can you give us an insight as to what kind of coverage will be up and running on sussexworld.co.uk/sport on the day?
Yeah, no, really looking forward to it. A great event to cover as well. So as you say, we'll be at the Wembley Stadium, so you can expect all the build up to the match as well. So there'll be lots of fan galleries going up. We're going to really have a look at the supporters and engage with the supporters and see how they're looking forward to the match as well. So yeah, really good occasion. And then we'll have a live blog from the actual match itself, and then you'll get all the reaction from the managers, the players. We'll get the player ratings as well afterwards. So yeah, really good event to cover, and looking forward to it.
Excellent stuff. Well, hopefully the result for Brighton matches it. But first, Derren, how do you see Brighton United going?
Yeah, as we mentioned earlier, I think the pace of the United attack is something which is a concern. But I also think Brighton can be a threat too. And I think I'm going to just go for Brighton victory. I think the game against Seville on Thursday is a factor, and it's a quick turnaround for United. And if it really gets going into the later stages, I think Brighton may just have a bit too much. So I think I'm going to go for a 3-2 Brighton.
Oh, Frankie, how do you see this one going?
Yeah, well, I'm back with a bang after last week. I managed to predict Brighton would win. If Sanchez had got across his goal and kept out that Conor Gallagher shot, I would have got it 100%. But there we go. I agree. I actually agree with Darren. I think United are feeling the pace of this season already. I think the amount of injuries they've had from playing in full competitions and going deep into full competitions. I think the Seville game, just 3 days before, will have an impact with Brighton having a full week to prepare. So I think I'm going to go as well for a Brighton win. I'm going to go for a 2-1 Brighton win.
And Mark, how do you see that one panning out?
I think this is going to be an FA Cup semi-final for the ages. I really do. I think there's going to be goals. It's going to be exciting. And I'm going for a similar score. I think the same scoreline as Darren. I think 3-2 Brighton. I think they're definitely goals from both sides. So it's going to be a thriller, I reckon, and really good on the eye.
Brighton are also in action in Meek in a game that I've not even touched upon. They travel to Nottingham Forest on Wednesday. Derren, quick overview on that game and how do you see that one going?
Yeah, that's going to be a real battle after the. It depends on a lot depends on the result of the FA Cup semi-final and how that goes and how Brighton can recover from that physically and emotionally as well, because it's the biggest game in quite a few of these young players' careers. This one at Wembley. So, and then to go into a team against Forest after that, who will be they'll be really smart defeat. So. Yeah, that's going to be a battle at the City Ground. So they're going to have to come back strongly. I'd probably say a 1-1 draw at the City Ground, maybe.
Oh, Frankie, how do you see that one going at the City Ground?
Yeah, I was actually thinking the same thing. I think Brighton will become the Manchester United of Sunday's game. They will be coming off the biggest game of their season, and then it's a quick turnaround, and they're travelling to a ferocious atmosphere against a team that are fighting for their lives at the bottom of the table. With the injuries that Brighton already have as well, I don't think they'll have much room for manoeuvre in terms of changes in between the two games. So I think they will struggle to get back up for it, even though I'm sure De Zerbi will make sure that they are mentally ready for it. I think it will be a struggle, so I'm also going to go for a 1-1 draw.
Do you see a Brighton win it? Not in Nottingham, then, Mark, at all? I'm
no.
quite surprised by these predictions. Oh, really?
I for exactly the same reasons as Derren and Frankie have said. I think it'll be 1-1. Yeah, Forest fighting for their lives, and and it will be a little bit after Lord Mayor's show, depending what happens. And it's not a terrible result either, is it? 1-1 at City Ground. I mean, obviously they'll want to win, but yeah, I think 1-1 as well.
And finally, the big one in League Two, Hartlepool against Crawley Town. Starting with you, Mark Dunford. How do you see that one going?
Yeah, obviously we want Crawley to win, but I think it will be a very tough atmosphere for them there. The crowd will be on them. But the pattern of Scott Lindsay's games are go out really aggressive first half, try and get the lead, and then contain second half. They did it against Tranmere on Saturday, and I think that will be similar. But I think it will be 1-1. Crawley will be 1-0 up at half time, and then Hartlepool will get a frustrating late equaliser, and Crawley will hang on for a point, but that puts him in good stead for the last two games of the season. So,
Frankie, how do you see Hartlepool Crawley going?
Yeah, huge game, massive game. But I think the result last week will really buoy Crawley on in what will, as Mark said, a very, very tough atmosphere to go to. But I think it's going to be a 2-1 win. I think this will be the game that Crawley managed to escape the drop.
Derren, do you see Crawley escaping the drop at Hartlepool?
Yeah, I do. I can really see there's a lot on the line for them for this one, and I think the result against Tranmere in particular, I think really gave them a boost. And I'm going for a 1-0. I think 1-0 victory.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time, chaps. Have fun at Wembley, and hopefully Albion don't disappoint you. You can catch up with all the latest sports news covering everything we've talked about today, including that huge game on Sunday at Wembley at sussexworld.co.uk/sport. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you all next week.